All right, let's talk Alabama Crimson Tide. Look, obviously, it's a new era in Tuscaloosa, new coaching staff. The era of Nick Saban is gone. It's time to put Saban in the rearview mirror and focus 100% on the future. Well, not really, at least based on this latest report involving the new Alabama coaching staff. It turns out Nick Saban isn't done helping out the Crimson Tide. Let's get right into the story. We'll talk about it more on the other side. This is from Bama 24/7. Less than a week before Alabama begins spring practice Monday, new defensive coordinator Kane Wommack had an important meeting on his schedule Wednesday. Nick Saban. The retired Alabama coach returned to Tuscaloosa earlier this month and had his first meeting with Womack last week before the two reconvened this morning. Coach has been awesome, Womack said. He's been helpful. He's honest, gives me his real thoughts. I ask him questions. I want to know this team. I want to know what he envisioned, what he built from a defensive perspective, obviously, and how to best take what was done the past 17 years and how they've evolved over 17 years to the point where they are now, and how we need to make that transition from a defensive scheme. All right, look, this is outstanding news for the Crimson Tide. Nick Saban being involved in any capacity during this transition is just great stuff. Give some credit to the new staff for allowing Saban to be involved, checking their ego at the door. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are. But first, Alabama fans, in the comment section below, spring ball not that far away. The summer camp won't be that far away, training camp. But guess what? We're all still waiting for football to come back this fall. A lot of great matchups for the Crimson Tide upcoming. Give us the one game you're looking forward to more than any other. Obviously, the Tide have a lot of wild matchups like they do every year, but give us the one that really sticks out to you right now and put it in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this move from this new Alabama coaching staff and what it could mean for them going forward?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is a really smart move by the Crimson Tide's DC Womack to kind of pick Saban's brain. And I know that sounds stupid to say. Of course, Nick Saban, probably the greatest college football coach of all time. Of course, you're going to be excited. But getting that in there, not being afraid, not being to say, okay, I want to blaze my own path. I don't want to be, linked to anything in the past. No, saying, I welcome Nick Saban's help. He's just getting out of football. He probably misses it. He wants to help, but he doesn't want to be as involved as he used to be. Coming in and taking that opportunity, I think is really smart because Womack has been where the Tide has been and where Saban has been defensively very recently. Womack traditionally is connected to that 4-2-5 defensive scheme, a scheme that Alabama in the past really has been aligned with, either the 3-3-5 or the 4-2-5 nickel. And they've kind of developed, though, they've progressed. And now that base defense is more of like a 3-4 defense. And now Coach Saban has a lot of experience running that 3-4 defense. And he has also progressed from the base defense that Womack used to like to coach. So he can talk to him about that aspect, which I think is very interesting. Another thing, he talks about coaching the players and what to do, what not to do. There's really interesting little quip here, and I'll read it to you. He says, we talk about teaching concepts. He said, you don't ever teach the player their job. You don't say, you're the mic, and here's what you do in cover three. He talks about how Saban says things like, okay, this is cover three. This is what we do. This is how you can beat it. This is what we do in different situations. So he's learning those key aspects from Saban as well. And finally, the most important part of the roster, the players. And I think that is the big part here, is Saban knows these players. Yes, a lot of players have gone to the draft or left Alabama. But there's some key players on this roster as well. And Saban can give him the insight and the keys and the tips to getting in touch with these guys, tapping into their, their greatest strengths, what their greatest weaknesses are, and how he can help combat those as well. So I think Coach Womack, excellent start, getting off on the right foot and using as much knowledge from Coach Nick Saban, who knows this team better than anyone in the entire world, to get himself ready and get this defense ramped up for this coming season.
I kind of mentioned it in my comments there is that I love the fact that he's willing to check his ego, right? Because it's, and I know it sounds weird to say a younger coach would be willing to check his ego against Nick Saban, the greatest coach of all time, greatest college coach of all time. But the reality is, to be a defensive coordinator at a program like Alabama, you got to have an ego. You got to have some pride in what you do. You got to think you're that good of a defensive coach. Otherwise, you really don't belong, to be totally honest. But I love the fact that Womack was checking his ego enough to sit there and say, listen, I am willing to sit here and learn from the master and apply it going forward, right? Because I just want to win football games. And there's no one that knows more about how to win football games at college, especially at the University of Alabama, than Nick Saban. And keeping him involved, keeping him in the loop, learning from him, learning about the players, learning about concepts and all that kind of deal. I just love that because so many times when an era changes, there just seems to be just a gap and just like all the old era is just gone. It's just like, all right, it's thrown to the past. We don't care about it anymore. And there usually is a pretty ugly transition, and some schools never recover. Look at Nebraska when Tom Osborne left and finally hung it up. They haven't been good since, right? The USC Trojans, when Pete Carroll left to go to the National Football League, obviously they were going through some recruiting issues, but they haven't even come close to that former glory since Pete Carroll left, right? They kind of completely try to go a different direction than those glory days, right? You see this all the time in college football. And the reality is the old era, the old regime, look at the Florida Gators. I mean, oh my gosh, ever since Urban Meyer left, they've been a dumpster fire, it seems like. But again, you see this all the time in college football where a great coach, a legendary coach leaves, new staff comes in and says, listen, they're old. We don't want to deal with them at all. We're focused on the future. And the reality is that old staff, those old coaches, Nick Saban in this case, they know, even though they're retired, a whole heck of a lot more than you do, not just about football, but certainly about the players on that team and the environment they're going to be in. Learn from them. They're a valuable resource, right? The defensive coordinator, Womack, here gets a lot of credit for using every resource at his disposal. We talk about it all the time, right? Great coaches use every tool they have. They use every player. They use every assistant on their staff. They use however much film they can, whatever connections they can leverage. Give Womack a lot of credit here for using Nick Saban and being willing to learn from him. Not a lot of coaches will do that. In fact, very few are. He's actually in the minority, and credit to him for taking advantage of it.